Well, it is time for summary video of episodes 15 through 21. We want to kind of summarize what we've been talking about for the last week and look at some of these ideas again. We're going to begin with episode 15, right? That's how you do this, episodes 15 through 21. Episode 15, we were in Genesis 28, and we were talking about the house of God. It was Bethel, and you might remember that Beit means house and El means God. Anytime we see the word El in the Bible, it is a picture of God. And what's beautiful about Genesis 28 is that Jacob, fleeing his murderous brother Esau, has this dream. And in this dream, there is a ladder with its foot on earth and its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God are ascending and descending on it. And he says, wouldn't you know it, this is the very house of God. I didn't know this was the house of God. He names the place Bethel, house of God. And the significance of that dream that's so stinking beautiful is that Jesus in John 1 kind of captures this dream and interprets this dream for us. And when he meets Nathanael for the first time, as Nathanael's approaching Jesus, he says, here's a true Israelite in whom nothing is false. Wow, here's a true Israelite in whom nothing is false. Nathanael says, Lord, do you know me? He says, even before Philip called you from under the fig tree, I know you. And Nathanael goes, wow, you are the Lord, you are the Messiah. And Jesus says, do you believe because I said I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than this. You will see heaven opened up and the angels of God ascending and descending on me, the Son of Man. So Christ kind of takes ownership of that. Christ is the ladder. He's the point of contact between heaven and earth. In episode 16, we were in Genesis 29 through 31. It's a pretty long text, and it is about Jacob arriving at his uncle Laban's house, working there for 20 years. He's going to work there for a total of 20 years. He's going to work for 7 years for his first wife, Leah. That was a trick. He's going to work for another 7 years for his wife, Rachel. He's going to work for another 6 years for some flocks. And so he'll be there for a total of 20 years. And remember, he loved Rachel and didn't really care for Leah. And I told you that when I was growing up, I favored Rachel as well because she was the pretty one. And of course, that's the one that Jacob liked the best. But what did I tell you? I reminded you that Leah is actually the one through whom the line of Christ comes. Leah is the mother to Judah, who is the great, multiple times over grandfather of Jesus. And so Leah is the one who carries herself with more dignity, more grace. Rachel steals her father's household idols, does some wicked things. And you might remember that Leah really wanted her husband to love her. And so her first 3 children that she has, she names one Reuben, saying, because the Lord has looked upon my affliction. She names the next one Simeon, and she says, I'm hated by my husband. The Lord's given me grace. She named the next one Levi, and Judah was named, now I will praise the Lord. And she named Judah that. Judah will be the line through which the kings come, and Judah will be the line through whom Christ comes. That was very, very significant, and we talked a lot of detail about that. Episode 17, Jacob and Esau. After 20 years, we get to Genesis 32, 33, and 35. Jacob is returning to his homeland. He is fearful because he's going to meet his brother Esau. He's afraid that Esau 20 years later still wants to kill him. Luckily, Esau has mellowed out a little bit and is not interested in killing Jacob at this point. But what happens here that's really significant is that Jacob wrestles with an angel, and while he's wrestling with the angel, you might remember that Jacob means hill holder or supplanter. He is the one or heel holder, deceiver, but he gets renamed Israel, and he's named now this person. He's going to be the father of the nation of Israel. So Jacob gets renamed Israel. The Bible will go back and forth calling him Jacob and Israel, so don't confuse that. And now he is God prevails. That's what his name is now, God prevails. And so he is named Israel. He's going to be the father of these 12 tribes. At this point, there are only a few of these tribes, and so they're just sons. At this point, they're just sons. They're not even tribes yet. They're barely families. And so that was episode 17. Not a lot in that one. But episode 18, and that's a very weird looking one here in my notes, but episode 18 was Genesis 37 through 39. Joseph is brother number 11 of the 12. And Joseph is not liked very much by his brothers because when he is about 17 years old, he has a couple of dreams. And in his dreams, he sees his brothers bowing down before him and worshiping him or treating him with honor. And they're like, will we really bow down and worship you? Will we really come and stand before you? Will we really submit ourselves to you? So what do the brothers decide to do? They decide to put him to death. He comes out to visit them in the field one day. They decide to put him to death. Long story short, they don't kill him, but they strip him of his clothes and they sell him into slavery to the Ishmaelites, who then later sell him into slavery to the Egyptians. And he goes to Egypt when he is about 17 years old. This is foretold for us in Genesis 15 when God said to Abraham, he goes, I'm going to send your people into a land that they do not know, where they will live for about 400 years, and then I'll bring them out. So that's foretold for us back in Genesis 15, verses like 13 through 15. And so he gets sold into slavery. And here's what's amazing. In chapter 39, he's working in Potiphar's house. And the Bible tells us that the Lord was with Joseph and made him successful in everything that he did. Now, Potiphar's wife is going to accuse Joseph of rape. And so when Potiphar gets home, she throws this accusation around. There's an unfair trial, probably no trial at all. Potiphar throws Joseph in jail. But what do we find? We find that when Joseph gets thrown in jail, the Lord is with Joseph, even in prison, and he becomes a person who is in charge of everything in the prison. When he worked in Potiphar's house, he was in charge of Potiphar's house. When he gets thrown in prison, he's in charge in the prison. God is giving him favor and blessing him so that he can be used in this way to provide peace and rescue for his family. All right. Episode 19 was Genesis 40 through 41. Joseph is in prison. He is there with two of Pharaoh's servants, the cupbearer and the baker. They both have dreams. They're disturbed by their dreams. They ask Joseph to give them an interpretation to the dream. Joseph says to the cupbearer, in 3 days, you'll be out of here. You'll be working for Pharaoh again. But when you get out of here, remember me. I shouldn't even be in prison. Tell Pharaoh that I'm here unjustly. The baker hears this interpretation. He goes, man, I had a dream too. Here's my dream. And Joseph goes, in 3 days, you're going to have your head cut off and put on a pole. And so the cupbearer gets a better interpretation than the baker does. 3 days later, they're both pulled out of prison. The cupbearer is restored to his position, forgets all about Joseph. The baker is killed. Obviously, can't mention Joseph. And so 2 years later, we see this in chapter 41, a whole 2 years later, Pharaoh has a couple of dreams, and they are disturbing dreams. There is a dream where 7 fat cows are swallowed up by 7 skinny cows. 7 fat ears of corn are swallowed up by 7 skinny ears of corn. And he can't sleep after these dreams. He's disturbed by them. And he goes, I don't know how to interpret these dreams. And this is what's really funny to me. He has this dream. The cupbearer comes to Pharaoh and says, look, I just remembered something. 2 years ago when I was in prison because I had offended you, I met this guy. His name's Joseph. He can interpret dreams. So Pharaoh gets Joseph out of prison and he says, here are my dreams. Joseph is gracious and interprets them because interpretations belong to God. He says, you're going to have 7 years of abundance and then 7 years of plenty. And he says the doubling of the dream means that God has decided it. It's about to happen. Because we know in the Hebrew culture, the doubling of something emphasizes it, right? So, while Joseph was in power in Potiphar's house, he was in power in prison, and now he is being raised to power here for Pharaoh. We talked about how God is using Joseph as a forerunner to protect the people of Israel, this small little nation that will become a great nation in the same way that he used Moses, Daniel, and Esther. So he is using Joseph here to go as a forerunner before the people. Let's jump over to episode 20. Episode 20 is when Joseph finally gets reconnected with his family. It's Genesis 42 through 44. Joseph, minimum, hasn't seen his family in 22 years. All right. So he got out of prison. He entered into Pharaoh's service when he was 30 years old, gets sold into slavery at 17, comes out of prison to work for Pharaoh at 30. It's now been 7 years of plenty and 2 years of famine. You add another 9 years to that. So it has been 22 years since he's seen his family. His family comes to him looking for food, looking for sustenance. They don't recognize him. At this point, he's dressed like an Egyptian. At this point, he's speaking to them through an interpreter, speaking the Egyptian language. And so they don't recognize him, but Joseph recognizes his brothers. He remembers the dreams that he had, that his brothers would come and bow down to them. Ultimately, he supplies food to them. Ultimately, on the second visit, he reveals himself to them, and he reveals to them that he is their brother. There are some pictures of Christ here. as it relates to the Jewish people, but we don't have time to rehash all of that right now. So Joseph makes himself known to his brothers, and he says, listen, I want you to know that there are still going to be 5 years of famine. Go back home, get dad, come here, bring all of your people here, bring your kids here, come back and be with me, and I will protect you. And so that's what happens. When he reveals himself to his brother, that brings us to episode 21. When he reveals himself to his brothers, he sends everybody out of the room. This was Genesis 45 through 48. He weeps aloud. He now speaks to them in the Hebrew language, and he says, I'm Joseph. I'm your brother. Is dad still alive? And then he tells him this. I love this, Genesis 45, 5 through 8. He says, you didn't send me here. God sent me here to preserve life. You didn't send me here. God sent me before you. You didn't do it, but God did it. So he is acknowledging that even though his brothers were wicked and intended harm for him, that God is the one who sent Joseph ahead of them into Egypt to protect them and to preserve them. And it's such a beautiful picture. The news comes back to Jacob, aka Israel, that your son is alive. Jacob rejoices and weeps, and he finds out that his son is still alive and that there is a place for them in Egypt, that the famine is still going to be for 5 years in the land. And so they move to Egypt. They live in the land of Goshen. They live in the land of Egypt, and Joseph, because of the power that he has risen to in Egypt, is able to provide for his family. And you might have remembered that when I was talking about this, I said they went into Egypt 70 or 75 people. It kind of depends on the count, whether or not you're counting Joseph and his family or not, as to whether it's 70 or 75. A couple of places in the Bible mention 70, a couple of places in the Bible mention 75. But they go into Egypt, 70 to 75 people. They will come out of Egypt, 604,000 men, not counting the women and children, 430 years later. And so all of this is incredibly cool. We learn that Jacob ends up in Egypt. He's 130 years old, and we learn that he will live there for 17 years before he dies. And so that is a summary of these past 7 days, 15 through 21. I hope that it's helpful for you. And I invite you to go back and watch the videos again if you need to kind of stir up your memory and see what some of the bigger details were that we didn't have time to do today in our summarization. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for journeying with us today at Simpler Bible. Together, you and I have looked at another passage of Scripture and come to know the Bible a little bit better and enjoy God more fully. This video, along with all of our videos, can be found at simplerbible.com, where you can enjoy our Through the Bible in a Year course. You can also enjoy a wealth of resources, blog posts that take you a little bit deeper into the text, a Bible study format that you can use with your small groups or your family, and we're creating new content all the time, all with the commitment to help us be people who know and enjoy God more fully. Thank you so much for being part of it, and we can't wait to see you next time.